Arsenal beat Fulham in the Premier League. Bukayo Saka returns with a goal, but it all came at a cost. Arsenal lose another two key players to injury just days away from that clash with Real Madrid. We'll get into it all on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Hey, everybody, how's it going? Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. On today's episode, we're going to look back at the victory over Fulham. We're going to discuss Bukayo Saka's return, how exciting that was, the mood, the feeling inside the stadium. But we're also going to reflect on some of the more disappointing things as well that sort of came of last night. Yes, we won. Yes, we closed the gap on Liverpool to 9 points, which at least applies just a tiny little bit of pressure ahead of their Merseyside derby. But, you know, there is a big negative to last night's game. And that is, of course, losing two more defenders, in particular, Gabriel Magalhães. That's not a disrespect to Jurrien Timber. Jurrien Timber's fantastic. And, you know, when you hear that Ben White has had a little bit of a setback, then obviously that means that Jurrien Timber is even more important. So it would be silly to kind of dismiss the impact his injury could have as well. But the Gabriel one looked serious. And that is my big worry. That is my big concern. We've seen a number of players pull up with hamstrings this season. And unfortunately for us, they've tended to be the more severe type of hamstring injuries, two of which have led to players requiring surgery. So you can understand why people are worried, why people are concerned, why people are really, really disappointed. The positive thing about Timber, if you kind of want to try and find one, is that, okay, he went down initially in the first half, but then he carried on for the majority of the game. He did end up going off eventually, but the fact that he was able to continue maybe suggests that it wasn't quite as severe as it could have been, or maybe was feared to be. I don't know. Look, we're going to get into all of this on the chat, in the podcast, I should say, and we're going to dive into the live chat as well, because it's great to get your takes and your thoughts on the show. As always, big hello to Gunnar Deja Vu. We've got Sammers, William Holmes. We've got Hacker, Oslo Guna says, big up Harry in the chat. So sad to see Big Gabby go off last night. We never get a break from injuries. Hope Kivior can step up while he is out. We'll talk about Jakub Kivior, and you know, I think the picture will become clearer with regards to whether or not he has to start against Real Madrid. We'll discuss him. We'll discuss what whoever comes in needs to do, what we're going to be missing, how maybe we adjust as a team to try and cope with that absence. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack over the next few days, I'm sure. And maybe when we've got a slightly clearer picture of Gabriel's situation, we'll be able to do that a lot more accurately and a lot more in depth. But anyway, let's start with last night's performance, the game overall, and we'll get into the injury stuff all in good time. Okay, so in terms of the game itself, it feels like, you know, a lot of our Premier League games are going to be somewhat, what's the word? Underwhelming in terms of just the whole feeling around them at the moment. You know, you turned up at the Emirates Stadium yesterday. There was plenty of empty seats. I know there was a lot of seats that were put back on the ticket exchange by season ticket holders who decided against attending, because obviously our fate feels like it's kind of sealed in terms of the Premier League. And it is very much all eyes on Real Madrid at the moment. Now, that is not something that I expect to be replicated in the dressing room. They're professionals, and to question how focused they were on last night's game would be to question their professionalism. And quite frankly, I don't want to do that. But as far as the fans are concerned, it is Real Madrid now. That's what the last couple of weeks have been about. That's what all the focus is on. That's the game that we want to be in tip-top shape for. There have been some suggestions that we should rest players and completely rotate in order to, make sure that we're in our best possible condition for that game. Look, for me, you got to keep the momentum going. You've got to win league games. You've got to close the gap on Liverpool as much as possible, even if you're not going to win it. And you've got to end the league season on as high as is possible. And so for me, yeah, you've got to keep going. And I'm not one of these people that goes into a game and says, oh, well, you shouldn't have risked him or you shouldn't have risked him. Listen, there'll be a lot of talk in the aftermath of the Gabriel Magalhães injury about players being overplayed. And I think that is a real concern. I think, I speak to ex-pros quite a bit in my job, and often they say, well, in my day, we played X amount of games or whatever. And while there's probably um, there's definitely some truth in it in terms of the volume of games they played. And they'll always point to the fact they played on worse pitches and there was less protection from the referees. The game wasn't as intense. The tempo of the game, the speed of the game wasn't the same. And so the two eras, in my opinion, are incomparable. So I get a little bit frustrated when I hear sort of ex-pros who say, well, no, in my day, I played X amount of games. It's not the same sport anymore. It's changed. It's developed a lot. Things have come on. The top sprint speed that you get on average from a Premier League footballer now, I'm sure is much higher than it would have been if you went back to, for example, the 80s or 90s. The game has evolved. The game has developed, and it's not the same thing anymore. So that feels like a kind of a lazy dismissal of what I think is a really, really important point and is a really, really big problem in the modern game. Hamstring injuries are happening left, right, and center. They are. You look at Gabriel as the sort of focus right now, and obviously he done his hamstring by the looks of things last night, but Gabriel didn't play the second game for Brazil during the international break. He even flew home early, which tells you that these things, they can go at any time, at any moment. Now, does being in the red, does overplaying, does being fatigued increase your chances of sustaining such an injury? I'm sure it does. In fact, I've had it explained to me by medical professionals. It does. But you never know when these things are going to go. So there is a real element of rotten luck about where we find ourselves. We were unlucky to lose Saka for the period that we did. I think in Saka's case, where it was a tear, you could probably point a little more to maybe the fatigue and the load that's been put on him over the last few years. Same with Kai Havertz. Gabriel Magalhães, I don't think he tore it. I think he just pulled up with a strain, but that's still going to be probably 3-4 weeks on the sidelines, which doesn't help us in our quest to beat Real Madrid and to overthrow European royalty. But in terms of the game, like there was a feeling about it of, apathy in a lot of ways. You turn up at the Emirates, the atmosphere wasn't great. It was good at certain points and at certain times when certain things seemed to spark the crowd into life. But generally speaking, it's all a little bit flat around our Premier League games at the moment because, as I keep saying, the focus is on Real Madrid. And so when you suffer something in the game that you're almost certain is going to impact your chances and your ability to compete with Real Madrid, it overshadows whatever happens in this particular game. And while yesterday I had a huge grin on my face when I saw Saka back in the squad, I loved it when he scored. I loved the atmosphere when he came even just to warm up. While that put a real smile on my face, and when he scored and kind of wheeled away in celebration with that big grin and ran over to the sort of medical staff as well to sort of thank them for their support and all the work they've done with him over the last few months to get him back fit. Spent over 100 days on the sidelines for Bukayo Saka. That was a really heartwarming moment, but I kept going back to the Gabriel injury. My mind kept flicking back to that. And as I walked back to my car last night, we recorded a match day reaction bit for our patrons. If you want to become a patron of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast, you can do so by visiting the link in the description. You'll support me to bring you more content. And we've got some really special stuff coming up, seeing as I'm off to Madrid in a couple of weeks' time. So now's a great time to jump on if you're interested. But as I was recording that, I found myself going down a really kind of negative path. And that is because no matter how hard I tried to focus on the Saka goal, Martinelli's really good performance, which we'll come on to in a minute, I kept going back to the injuries because the injuries have the potential to really destabilize us against a really difficult opposition. So, worry and concern for sure. Let's pop over to the chat because there's a lot of comments coming through at the moment. Afsar says, I was at the Emirates and the atmosphere was dead and fans had zero interest in the game. By the 80th minute, the stadium was empty. There was people leaving at that point. I'm not, I'm not even exaggerating, and Afsar's certainly not exaggerating. I certainly saw that with my own eyes. Samus says Kivior is either going to be Senderos against the Galacticos or Silvestre against Barcelona, for those who remember. Look, we'll talk as that game approaches about how we go about rectifying the problem that we have, how we go about trying to plug and fill that hole as best as possible. Because the thing with Jakub Kivior, and I was going to talk about this a little bit later on, but seeing as you brought it up, the thing about Jakub Kivior for me is this. I don't think he's ever really got a chance to play in his preferred position for a long stretch of time. He is a left-sided centre-back. That's what Jakub Kivior is. And because Gabriel's availability has been so good, because Gabriel's pretty much been a mainstay, he's not got that opportunity. He's played at times at right centre-back, which I don't think really works for him. I don't think you should underestimate the difference, by the way, between playing on your actual side and the opposite side. There are some centre-halves over the years. For example, your John Terrys who played left centre-back, but were right-footed players, but they always played in that position. Sol Campbell's probably another one as well, where you look at them and you go, okay, they made that work. I think for a lot of players, it can cause a problem. It can be difficult to switch from left to right. And whenever Kivior's had an opportunity, he's been playing right centre-back or he's been playing left back. And none of those positions suit him, in my opinion. So what I will say was, it was kind of nice to see him play in the right position. And when he came on before half time, I thought actually he looked quite good. He looked quite solid. He looked quite comfortable. But as the game went on, I think you started to see the vulnerabilities that we have when we're without Gabriel. Now, it's not because it's Kivior, right? Let's be clear. Do I hugely rate the player? Not really. Am I sold on him completely? No, I'm not. I'm not sure about Jakub Kivior. I haven't been sure about him for a long, long time. But I do acknowledge and recognize that Gabriel is so damn good that when you're without him, it's going to look like there's a hole in your team. And it's going to be really, really difficult to put anybody in there who is even going to get close to the levels that Gabriel can deliver. He's dominant. He's mobile. He's happy to squeeze up, drop a ball over the top of his head and get him turning and running back towards his own goal. He's comfortable in doing that. He's got no problem dealing with any aspect of the game at centre-back, Gabriel. Kivior's not there. Kivior's not there, but nobody else is either. And the point I'm trying to make here is that let's say Ricardo Calafiori was fit and was going to play at centre-back, left centre-back in Gabriel's absence. Would I be happier with that? Probably. But Calafiori wouldn't exactly give me that feeling of kind of invincibility that Gabriel does at times, because I'd have worries about him defensively as well. The point I'm trying to get to, and I've gone around the houses to make, is that Gabriel is so damn good. It doesn't matter who you put in there. It's very unlikely that you're going to get a similar level. So whatever way you look at it, being without him is a massive blow. In terms of the game itself, because I keep digressing back onto the injuries thing. This is my point. Like last night, I was trying to kind of move away from it, and I just couldn't. I kept getting sucked back in and dragged back in to that particular conversation. But in terms of the performance, I thought Fulham started the game quite well. I thought they looked quite lively down their left-hand side, our right-hand side. I thought they had a few opportunities to make better of some transitional situations. They didn't. And then obviously Arsenal break the deadlock in the end through Mikel Merino, who's on fire at centre forward. He's got 6 goals now, I think, in the Premier League, which is a really, really good return. I think 5 of those, if I'm not mistaken, have come since he moved into the striking role. And it's funny, isn't it? Because although we all agree and understand that we need to go out and get a striker in the summer, and it's very much top of a lot of people's agendas, if a striker had come in for £80 million and scored that many goals in such a short period of time, everybody would be looking and going, what a great bit of business that was. So sometimes, you have to just zoom out a minute and give the player his flowers and his dues, because we know he's not the ideal candidate, right? We know he's not the best option. We know he's not a natural fit for that position, but he's taken on a job for the team. He's been adaptable. He's been focused. He's worked incredibly hard. And he does have a good goal-scoring instinct, Mikel Merino. And I'm pretty sure this is his best goal-scoring season in a league campaign ever. And he's 28 years of age, right? So, he's obviously played a fair bit. But anyway, you look, we're in a great position in terms of having him step into that role and do it well. But we know that that is not really a sustainable solution, and eventually we're going to have to upgrade. But again, take nothing away from the Spaniard, because he's doing his bit, he's working hard for the team, and he's delivering, which is all you can ask for, really, isn't it? Obviously, second half starts, and yeah, what was the atmosphere like? It was as you'd expect after a halftime break. Like initially, I kind of hate the fact that everybody leaves their seats. I understand why they do it, and obviously, well, within your rights, still, I can't tell you can't go get a drink or go use the facilities, but you know, it does. It does for me. Yeah, it does. It does affect the atmosphere sometimes. The fact that everybody disappears, it then sort of takes sort of 10 or so minutes for people to kind of come back into their seats, and then you get back into kind of game mode. It's a little bit distracting when people are sort of passing by you and all the rest of it. But anyway, second half started, and you felt like Arsenal needed that second goal to just put themselves a bit of distance in this one and put them in a position where they could comfortably go on and win the game. You always felt that Fulham, with their counter-attacking capabilities, were a threat. And, thankfully we went and got that second goal very shortly after Bukayo Saka came on. I think it was 6 minutes after Bukayo Saka comes on, he scores. Martinelli's flick for the goal, just incredible. The movement, the build-up, I think it was Odegaard that pinched the ball back. Was it Odegaard that pinched the ball back, or am I thinking of that one where he put it over the bar? I think I'm thinking of the one where he put it over the bar. But I thought that the move to create that goal was fantastic, and what a moment it was for Bukayo Saka. Like the roar when he came on was fantastic. Obviously, when he scored, the place really took to lift off, and you felt at that point that Arsenal were going to go on and win the game. The problem was that at 2-0, I felt we were still a little bit naive, to be honest with you. I felt like we were still overcommitting. I felt like a bit of fatigue kicked in. And rather than looking at the situation and saying, look, we're 2-0 up, we don't really need to exert ourselves, we don't need to keep going, maybe we need to let the game come to us a little bit, we kept chasing, we kept pushing, we kept making runs into areas that we really shouldn't have done. You think about Miles Lewis-Skelly. Like, I don't associate naivety with this team anymore, because I think we've come through that. I think under Mikel Arteta, we've developed a steel and a nous that means that we're not a soft touch anymore, and that we do manage games generally quite well. Yesterday, though, I felt like all of that went out the window. I felt like our wingers were at 2-0 pushing too hard. I felt like our fullbacks were going too much, and it was kind of like, come on, guys, just drop off a little bit, get close to your centre halves, be a part of that defensive unit, and make sure that we don't get pulled apart and we don't get opened up. And instead, we gifted Fulham some opportunities. Obviously, Muniz pulled a goal back after missing a really good chance just prior to that. And yeah, all of a sudden it was 2-1, and it was a nervy finish, and it didn't need to be. And that was my kind of frustration with that. Look, we got over the line. It's another 3 points. We closed the gap on Liverpool to 9. Means we're going to win the league now, doesn't it? But yeah, look, overall, it was a professional job, and that's what you're seeing from Arsenal at the minute. I think they've only lost one in their last 21 or so league games. So, they've done well to kind of cope with all the injuries and the absences that we've had, but we've just been missing that X factor at certain points and at certain times, and that's done the damage that sees us as far behind as we are currently. But we just got to keep going, and we just got to keep putting points on the board. Let's try and make it difficult for Liverpool, as difficult as possible. But yeah, as I keep saying, the focus is on Real Madrid right now, and I'm going to go back to it because the injuries make me worry about Real Madrid. Just before we go on to that and focus on that a little bit more, I don't want to do it, but I keep getting dragged back into doing it. I do want to talk about Martinelli. We can talk all we like about Bukayo Saka's return and all the rest of it. It was a great moment. It's fantastic. And, we kind of really built up to it in the lead up to this game, where we were overhyping the fact that he was back and all the rest of it, because it's just great to hear. But when it comes to Martinelli, I think there's been a lot of critics recently. I think it's fair to say that his game hasn't been as well-rounded as we know it can be. I don't think he's had the effect that we know he can. Yet yesterday, I saw a much more familiar version of Gabriel Martinelli, the Gabriel Martinelli that we fell in love with a few seasons back when he really kind of took the Premier League by storm. He was fantastic. He was fantastic during that period. And there has been a drop-off, but actually last night he looked back to his brilliant best. Still some work to do in terms of at times making the right decision or producing the right outputs, but relentless running down that left-hand side, taking Castagna on the outside over and over and over and over again. I was doing a show earlier with Perry Groves, who said that Timothy Castagna is probably in the ice bath this morning, trying to recover from being run ragged by Gabriel Martinelli. Putting some really, really good crosses, particularly with that left foot going on the outside, seems to have found the knack of kind of standing the ball up in the right areas and giving us a chance. And when you've got that big centre forward, okay, we don't have a natural one right now, but we've got Mikel Merino in there for the time being. That makes you a threat. So, yeah, I wanted to give him his props because I thought he had a really good game. And I think we're all quite quick to jump on Martinelli's back when he's not performing in the way that we know he can. Therefore, it's only fair that we give him the credit and praise that he deserves when he does turn in a really good performance. He obviously had the ball in the back of the net, but unfortunately, he was ruled offside. He just went a little bit early, didn't he, with his run? But yeah, really good performance from him overall. Dembo says, watching from the Gambia, very concerned about the injuries to Gabby and Jurrien. Hope they are not serious. Damien, just on Jakub Kivior, says, I've never rated Kivior. We got scammed. The guy's a squad player, mate, and we paid squad player price for him. So it is what it is. Do I think he's good enough to start week in, week out? No, but how many centre-halves are going to come that are good enough to start week in, week out and are going to say, don't worry about it, I'll just sit and play second fiddle to Gabriel and Saliba? So you got to be realistic about the situation we find ourselves in as well. Leroy says, morning, Harry, currently watching the game back in Mexico, enjoying my honeymoon, but had to stop by to say congratulations. Thank you very much. For those of you wondering what the congratulations are for, there are loads in the comments today, so a big thank you to every single one of you. I'm going to be a dad again a little bit later on this year. The Symeou clan is growing. Thank you for all the kind messages. I really, really do appreciate it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the injuries and it's injuries, because it's not just about Gabriel's injury. It's about the fact that Calafiori's out again for a number of weeks, having suffered a problem whilst on international duty. Massive blow, but it's been the story of his season. When I did like a kind of scouting report video / podcast, I remember recording this while I was out in Germany for the Euros. I remember recording this in my hotel room. And when I was preparing for it, when I was doing the research, I was sitting sort of downstairs in the hotel lobby with my colleague. Big shout out to Marco. He's Italian, obviously a big Serie A fan. And we were talking quite a bit about Calafiori. And he kept saying, look, the guy's got potential. The guy's got ability, but the guy can't stay fit. And that is going to be a big problem. And then when you think about how the extra physicality and the extra physical demand that you have to deal with as a player playing in the Premier League versus playing in Serie A, he thought it could potentially be a recipe for disaster. And I think he's right. Some of these injuries have been suffered on international duty, which is something you can't do an awful lot about. But you just think about it, man. Like, how many times now over the course of this season has Ricardo Calafiori gone down with a problem? How many times have we had to be without him for a period of time? And then it starts to make that investment look bad. And it starts to make you wonder if we could have spent the money elsewhere. When he's fit and available, what he brings is brilliant. I love what he brings. I love who he is, what he is. I love the sort of the spontaneity about his game. But there's two things. Spontaneity as a defender can make you unreliable, which I don't like. And if you're unreliable with regards to your fitness, then it's not a load of good, is it, being this kind of really impactful player if you're not available and you can't help the team. The injury that he suffered this time around, it feels like an unlucky one when you watch it, the way he kind of falls. But it also feels lucky in the sense of, if you watch it, you feared that it could have been a lot worse. So Yeah, I don't really know where to sit on this, but the reason I'm talking about injuries rather than either Gabriel or Timber is because it's the volume of defenders that we're without at the minute. When you look at our squad, if everybody was fit, we're well stocked defensively, but too many of those players fall into the category of being constantly injured. You know, you got potentially Timber out now. Gabriel for me is definitely out. Potentially Timber. White, who suffered a niggle in the lead up to this game and wasn't able to play. Mikel Arteta confirmed that it was a knee thing. So there's worry there because a knee can be a really difficult injury to deal with and a really difficult problem to shake. So you worry about that. If White and Calafiori are fit, okay, Gabriel being out is a blow because I've already discussed, I don't think there's anybody as good as him out there. But it's a blow that you can cope with because you either put Ben White in at centre-back alongside William Saliba, or you push Jurrien Timber in there alongside him, and you stick Ben White at right-back. There would be options. But with so many of these defensive players out, our options are incredibly limited. Like, you're going to rely on an 18-year-old Miles Lewis-Skelly against Real Madrid, which I think we might have done anyway, but it does, when you think about the bigger picture, it does feel potentially problematic. Then you might have to play Kivior at left centre back, which is a problem. So all of a sudden, Lewis Skelly, who's inexperienced as it is going to have a weaker centre back playing inside of him, which makes his life and job harder. Then you've got Saliba on the right-hand side, and he might have to babysit Thomas Partey at right back, for example, if Timber can't make it, because there's no White, as far as we're aware at the minute. Hopefully it's not a serious thing and he's back within the next few days. But right now, as far as we know, there's no White. And the other one is Takahiro Tomiyasu. Like, nowhere to be seen. The guy's literally nowhere to be seen. I know we had an update not that long ago about his fitness, but the point I'm trying to make is that if Tomiyasu and Calafiori, for instance, are going to constantly be injured, what's the point in having them? And I know that sounds really kind of like dismissive of them. And, you know, the real world is very different and you can't be as ruthless. You got to look at the human side and you got to, you know, help these players and get them fit and all the rest of it. I get all of that. But from a purely footballing perspective, it's no good having a load of options if those options are never available to you. And in the case of those two in particular, Tomiyasu and Calafiori, they've spent too much time on the sidelines. One-off injuries can happen. But these guys have spent too much time on the sidelines and it's starting to ring alarm bells for a lot of Arsenal fans. The other thing is Partey at right back. Partey's our best six by a distance. So you weaken yourself there as well by putting him in at right back, but we don't really have much choice. And so just when you felt like we were starting to get people back, I've been saying, look, against Real Madrid, if we can keep everyone fit and Bukayo returns, we are one player away from our best 11. That gave me encouragement. That gave me confidence. Now we could be 3 or 4 players away from our best 11 because if Timber's out, if Gabriel's out, if White's out, all 3 of them would be in my best 11, by the way, because I'd play Timber at left back against Real Madrid. All 3 of those guys would be my best 11. And then you've got no centre forward either. So actually 4 of your best 11 are all of a sudden missing. And our chances of progressing in that tie then significantly reduce. I don't want to be that doom and gloom guy because I think Arsenal have coped really well with the injuries that we've had this season. I know people won't feel that way necessarily now. But I think when you look back at the season and you tot up how many problems we had, how long we were without some of our really key players, I think you'll look back eventually when the dust settles a little bit and you'll go, do you know what? We gave it a good go considering to finish second and to make it to whatever round in the Champions League, given those circumstances, actually a lot more positive than is maybe being portrayed. But yeah, really disappointed. So to kind of summarize on here, I thought it was a good win. It was another step towards just kind of putting the pressure on Liverpool a little bit and making them work for their sort of title victory. Yeah, all of that positive. Bukayo Saka's return, amazing, brilliant to see, lovely to see, and I'm excited about what he's going to bring to the tie against Real Madrid, and having him back makes us far more dangerous for sure. But it's really difficult to not have your kind of thoughts overshadowed by what we saw on the injury front. And just when you thought we were coming out of the other side of these wretched injury problems that have plagued our season, we get hit with another couple. If you include Ben White, another 3. And all of a sudden, the outlook looks very, very different. The idea of Kivior playing centre back at Real Madrid, quite frankly, scares the living daylights out of me. And it's partly because I'm not sure about the player himself, but it's partly because he's barely played as well. Like, don't underestimate that as well. I think we're very quick to judge players when they come into the side for sort of brief cameo roles, and we very often overlook the fact that they've got no rhythm. They haven't got that because they're not playing games. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack. Somehow we've managed to turn a victory into a disappointment. But hey, that's the life of an Arsenal fan. We're not allowed to have nice things, are we? Anyway, I am going to leave it there. Massive thank you to every single one of you for joining me on today's episode of the pod. Don't forget to leave a like on the video if you're with us on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're with us on YouTube. And if you're listening via Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review. All of that stuff really, really does help. I will see you all on the next episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a great day. A victory for the Gunners, but unfortunately, it came at a cost. All the best. Goodbye.